Dr. German, I'd like to ask you now about a Malcolm X rally. It's Sir B28 28204. This is a report from HN78, dated the 12th of September 1992, about a Malcolm X rally. On the second page, you are recorded as having been present. It says the meeting was the last in a series of 7 rallies held throughout the UK to promote Kevin Ovenden's book Malcolm X, Socialism and Black Nationalism. Since the first rally in Tottenham on the 6th of September, Ovenden, who is a leading black SWP activist, and Ahmed Shouki, a prominent member of the SWP's American sister party, the International Socialist Organization, have refined their approach. They have diluted their attack on black nationalism and have stopped trying to recruit blacks directly into the SWP, aiming instead to gain black support in the SWP struggle against racism and the class structure. During an often heated debate, it became clear that the majority of the black audience supported the prevalent view expressed throughout the tour that black self-help and unity was a necessary precursor to any organised black involvement with predominantly white groups, even anti-racist ones like the SWP. Despite the repeated rejection of the SWP doctrine, some party members see the rallies as having been a success. This is due largely to the speeches by Ahmed Shouki on the Los Angeles riots, which portrayed the conjoining of the Bloods and the Crips street gangs against the common enemy, i.e. the police, as a socially and politically significant blow against the American ruling class. This, they feel, has sown the seed of mass action in the minds of the black community. Can I just ask, the sentiment that the Crips and Bloods uniting against the police as a common enemy being socially and politically significant, was that a view held by those of you in the SWP Central Committee?
I don't suppose we ever discussed it at that level, but I think what Ahmed was saying was that, as people know, there's this long-standing gang rivalry in Los Angeles, which actually is very destructive in all sorts of ways. And the point he was making was that the Bloods and the Crips, who were very much opposed to one another, did unite in terms of standing up against the police. And that was the point he talked about, the Los Angeles riots. I mean, these were of very great significance in the United States at the time, and they were probably the most significant after the events of the 1960s. So I think that's what he was referring to. If you want to put it in more general terms, perhaps he was talking about sort of working class unity against the authorities, against the establishment and against the state. I think that was the sense in which he meant it, yeah.
And that has the approval of the SWP Central Committee?
As I say, I don't think they ever discussed it, but certainly I agreed with that general sentiment that it was a step forward, that this working class, which was divided by this kind of rivalry on the basis of gangs, was actually overcoming some of that in the course of the developments, not just of the riots themselves, but of what happened afterwards.
Thank you. If we could take that down, and if we could have up 245218, please. Now, this is a report which follows the verdict in the trial of those accused in relation to the death of Joy Gardner. It's dated the 23rd of June, 1995. If we look first of all at paragraph 1 to set the scene, this report deals with the meeting held at Wood Green Civic Centre at 19:30 hours on Wednesday, the 21st of June, 95, to protest against the verdict in the Joy Gardner trial. The meeting was extremely well attended, with the majority of those present being from the black community. The venue was too small to accommodate all those wishing to enter, so a public address system was used to relay the debate outside to those who were unable to gain access. The majority of those present were aged 30 plus, and many were representative of the black middle classes. The meeting was carried out in an orderly manner throughout. It finished about 22:45 hours and there was no disorder. Could we go now to paragraph 3, please? Or page 3, top paragraph. Thank you. Yes. The top paragraph on the right-hand side. Nicky Johnson, SWP, spoke of the Tories' need to use the race card. Now, she said, so-called illegal immigrants would be deported. She reiterated that blacks had helped build this country, and now that they were no longer needed, they were to be shipped back. She said that the only way to get justice against the ruling classes was to do as the people of Los Angeles did in 1992 and riot on the street. She said she found it brilliant how blacks and Hispanics carried out these riots and how recently the Asian youth had done the same thing in Bradford. She urged everybody to join the demonstration called for the 29th of July 1995 and show the police that they would no longer accept the killing of black people. Are you able to help us with whether this is or is not an accurate record of what Nicky Johnson said?
I don't know. I wasn't at the meeting, and I don't know whether it was an accurate record of what she said.
And assuming that it is an accurate record, would her utterances have had the support of the SWP Central Committee?
Well, I don't think I would have phrased it in quite the way that she did, but I think the point she was making was that blacks and Hispanics had actually united, and this is the point obviously earlier about the different gangs, and that had united in terms of standing up for themselves. I mean, you have to remember this was after a horrific murder by the police of a black man in Los Angeles. And I don't agree that the riots on the streets is the main way that people will get justice against the ruling classes, but I do think that she was right to say that people do have to unite across different races and ethnicities and so on, and that they have to stand up for themselves. And I think that is the point that she was trying to make there.
Thank you. Could we take that down? And could we have up, please, 28,200? This is the first of two reports about the Battle of Waterloo. This one precedes the date. Not the open ground schedule, the document itself, please. There should be a document with the same UCPI number. That's it. Thank you. So it's about forthcoming event, then forthcoming 12th of September 92, Waterloo Station, about arising from Screwdriver, which is a far-right band, isn't it? Says that the likelihood of disorder, violent disorder or criminal acts possible. Paragraph 1, the leadership of the Socialist Workers' Party has directed that members of North and East London branches of the SWP and the ANL are to attend Waterloo Station to confront neo-Nazis and skinheads. Members have been instructed to meet at 4:30 in the main concourse near the cinema and have been strictly warned that they are to take orders from Julie Waterson and from no other person. There are no plans by the SWP ANL to attend the eventual venue of this concert. It is known that the majority of SWP ANL members are apprehensive at the thought of physical confrontation, and this may be reflected in a low turnout. Can you help us? Were you present on the day at the Battle of Waterloo?
No, I wasn't.
Were you involved in preparations, and in particular in the direction that is referred to in this paragraph?
What about Julie, that Julie was the person that they had to take orders from and nobody else?
But both that and the fact of the turnout from the North and East London branches.
Well, that would have been perfectly normal, that if there was a local protest, you would ask particular districts in London to attend. So, yeah, that would have been normal. I knew that I remember the Screwdriver gig taking place. I don't quite understand this. I mean, it seems to me that what it's saying is that that people have to go to Waterloo Station, but then they're saying they don't go to the eventual venue. So I don't quite understand what that is about and what they're trying to say there.
Do you have any recollection of what the directions to members were?
No, and I probably didn't know them, apart from, if I wasn't on the demonstration, apart from that they were to go to Waterloo and they would be told where to go then. So whether there was a protest aimed to get people going to the gig at Waterloo Station itself, or whether people were being redirected from there to somewhere else, which sometimes happened with these sorts of things, I don't actually know. I don't quite understand, as I say. It then says that the majority of SWP-ANL members are apprehensive at the thought of physical confrontation, which is exactly the opposite point than has been made at various points in these reports. So, I mean, what are they saying? That the SWP did go in large numbers, it didn't? I don't know, really.
Do you know whether there was a strict warning to take orders from Julie Waterson and no one else?
Quite likely, because these situations are sometimes quite fraught. And if, for example, you're saying to people, go to Waterloo Station, we'll then redirect you to another place where we think the fascists might be, then it would be sensible to say that this person is responsible for giving you directions, and don't just head off on your own, or don't just take any notice of anybody else who might be trying to give you orders at that time. That would be how I would interpret that.
I mean, there may be various reasons for it. One could posit that you don't want your members caught in small numbers by the far right.
That's one possibility, yeah.
You don't want hotheads provoking violence, which leads to other of your members being hurt.
Well, that may be a possible interpretation, but it's very hard to tell from this what's going on, really.
Thank you. If we could take that down and have up, please, 28205. This is a post-event report dated the 18th of September. It says, events on the 12th of September took the ANL SWP leadership by surprise. They now regard it as a miscalculation that they did not mobilise greater opposition to the Screwdriver gig and present a higher profile on the day. Prior to the demonstration, the ANL SWP were of the opinion that the gig was of no political significance and merely an excuse for anti-fascist action to have a fight. It was only when widespread publicity was given to the anticipated confrontation that some members were directed to attend. At this time, there is no intention among SWP or ANL leaders to abandon their policy against violence, but efforts to generate more mass actions will be redoubled. Can you recall whether this accurately reflects the feeling of the SWP's leadership after the event?
Well, if there weren't enough people, and if the demonstration was very large, and if the SWP didn't have a large mobilisation, they may well have thought we should have had a higher profile, we should have had maybe larger numbers there. But I would just refer this back to the context of the previous situation that we had with anti-fascist work in the late 70s, which was, as we've discussed before, but the whole question of squadism and the idea of small groups of people going off to confront the fascists physically. And it was something that we were very much opposed to. We thought it was it was counterproductive in terms of what it did. Anti-fascist action had that approach in a way that we didn't. So I would think that this, they just saw this as possibly it's going to be some kind of confrontation between a small number of anti-fascist action and a small number of fascists. Now, it's clear that it was a bigger demonstration than that, but that would explain, I think, some of the caution in the previous thing about that people should take orders from Julie and shouldn't wander off on their own and do all those sorts of things. That's how I would explain it.
Because there was quite a lot of violence in the event, wasn't there?
I don't know. I mean, I don't recall. I'm not saying there wasn't, but as I say, I wasn't there, and I think it was. If it was they were a far-right band, and therefore their followers would have been skinheads and various far-right figures. So yes, there probably was quite a lot of violence at it.
Could we take that down, please? And I'd like to move next to a march at Welling in May 1993. It's tab B34, sir. If we could have 33905, please. Thank you. If we could start with the next page. This is an event performer for an event on the 15th of May 1993 in Plumstead and Welling, Kent, involving the Anti-Nazi League. 1,500 people present. It says disorder was prevented, but the mood was angry. Organisers of this event, i.e. leaders of the SWP, are disappointed at the low turnout for what had been heralded as a huge demonstration. Only about 1,500 demonstrators participated, as opposed to the somewhat optimistically anticipated 5,000. The poor showing is being attributed to three main factors, namely a general fear of violence following disorder on the 8th of May, the rerouting of the march to avoid the BNP bookshop and headquarters, and rumours that the march had actually been banned. These appeared in the press on the morning of the march and the FA Cup final. So it would appear that there was a lot going against a successful demonstration on that day. Can you recall this event?
Yes, I do recall it because there was a demonstration the week before which was bigger than this, I think, and where that went to the bookshop. This was an attempt to do a similar thing. The reasons put here are there's probably a degree of truth in the fact that it didn't go to the bookshop and people would want to go to the bookshop. The cup final I can't really comment on. I don't know how much that affects people going on demonstrations of this sort. And yeah, I mean, I think people, again, if you look at the background to this, we've got this very violent situation developing in this part of London. I mean, there have been several racist murders, including the murder of Stephen Lawrence just around that time. We'd had this BNP so-called bookshop, which actually was a headquarters, a political headquarters, which many people believed did organise racist attacks from the bookshop, is that it encouraged these sorts of things. And so these may all have had a factor, but sometimes it's also just the case that one week you might have a demonstration that it hits, it strikes a chord with people in a way and they come to it, and you might have one on the same subject a week or two later and it doesn't. So all of those could be possible factors in it. I'm not sure any one is, but obviously it was disappointing to get that number of demonstrators.
If we could go to the bottom paragraph on that page. Thank you. Before the demonstrators arrived at Plumstead, stewards had been given instructions by the organisers. The object of the exercise was to be a march on the BMP premises, notwithstanding police measures to prevent this. If numbers were sufficient, the marchers were to try to force their way through police lines at Upper Wickham Lane and then to the bookshop. If the first frontal assault failed, activists at the rear were to turn and lead the march through forced through weaker police lines and to the bookshop via back streets. Organisers assumed that the first assault would draw police away from the apparently compliant marchers at the rear and enable a second successful attack on the police cordon. You are recorded in this report as having been present. Is that right?
No, it isn't right. I mean, the idea that we are going to say that the marchers are going to force...
Sorry, my first question is, were you there?
Yes, I was there, sorry.
Now.
Yeah.
Now.
Is it right? Yeah.
Is this right?
No, I don't think it is. And I don't think it is because if you look at the idea that the marchers were going to try to force their way through police lines, I don't think that would have been the way in which it was assessed or the way in which we were going to do it. I think what we may well have said is we wanted to get to the bookshop, we're prepared, and this has happened on other demonstrations, we're prepared to go by other routes. If the police won't let us go down this route, we'll go by other routes. And I think that's actually what happened, or what people tried to do. But this stuff about organisers assumed that the first assault would draw police away from the apparently compliant marchers at the rear that definitely was not the way it was planned or discussed. And I think, again, this is a sort of attempt to put a rather strong view on actually how the demonstration was organised. And I don't think it's right.
Was there an instruction to try and force the police lines?
No, there wasn't. What we would have said is we want to go to the bookshop, and that would be the position that we would have taken. But we do not say to people, try to force through the police lines. It's just simply, it's not realistic for people to do it. And therefore, we would have looked at other ways of doing it. And as I say, that would have been, as it says here, people would try to get to the bookshop via back streets. I mean, that's quite a common tactic on certain demonstrations of all sorts.
Thank you. Could we go to page 3, top paragraph, please? The low number of demonstrators, virtually equalled by the police, and the apparent preparedness of the police to deal with any trouble, dissuaded the leaders from instigating the plan. Is it right that the event was very heavily policed?
Yes, it was right. It was right. But the rest of it is not right, because it wasn't true that it dissuaded the leaders. That wasn't the intention. Was definitely not to force their way through police lines. So it would have been that people would have thought of different ways of getting round it without having to do that. And yet again, this is this whole notion that heavy policing means demonstrations don't do anything. I've been on so many demonstrations where there's very, very few police and there is no disorder. So it doesn't really add up, this idea that you have to have heavy policing and you have to have riot shields, you have to have all these sorts of things in order to make sure that people don't riot. People don't riot most of the time for perfectly good reasons.
What success did your members have in getting to the bookshop via the back streets?
Not much success, not much success.
And why was that?
Probably because there weren't enough of them.
And too many police?
Well, I doubt the police were down all the back streets, so I'm not sure that was the main reason either.
Could we go to the next paragraph, please? Thank you. In an attempt to salvage some credibility, the organisers distributed the relatively small number of black demonstrators strategically throughout the march to enhance its blackness. Did that happen?
No. I mean, this stuff is just really not serious. I mean, the idea that you're going to say to black members, please, move around the march so it looks like there's more black people on it than there are. It's just, I don't know where they get this stuff from. I really don't.
Additionally, Gary McFarlane, a leading black in the SWP, made an impassioned speech calling for a concerted effort in conjunction with Youth Against Racism, YAR, the youth wing of Militant and Panther UK, against the BNP and racist attacks. This, said McFarlane, would bring at least 10,000 demonstrators onto the streets of Welling, and the police would be powerless to stop them marching on the BNP. Did Mr. McFarlane say anything to that effect?
I don't recall what Gary said, but it's quite possible, yeah.
Because putting that sort of number of demonstrators on the streets of Welling is what happened a few months later, isn't it?
In October, yeah.
And was the intention to have such numbers that the police would be powerless to stop them marching on the BNP?
The intention was that we wanted to go to the bookshop, that we were determined to go to the bookshop. We thought it was completely unjustified that the police were not allowing us to go there in the context of the racist violence that had been going on, in the context of the election of a fascist councillor in Tower Hamlets, which had also happened that year. There was a very big wellspring of opinion that we had to do more to stop the fascists, and that was a very important thing. So yes, Gary was saying we'll get sufficient numbers onto the streets of Welling and the police will have to let us march onto the headquarters, because we were very open, as were these other organisations and all sorts of other people, that we wanted to close that bookshop down. We thought it was the centre of racist organising. Of course, now, 30 years later, these things aren't really in dispute. But at the time, the police, some of whom were involved in all sorts of complicity over the Lawrence case and over other cases in that area, the truth is the police were determined to stop us from doing it, and we felt that was unjustified given the threat of the bookshop and given our rights in a democracy to be able to protest outside it.
Could we go to the next paragraph, please? It is clear that the violence shown by the Panthers on the 8th of May has increased the stakes in the battle for credibility amongst the anti-racist groups. The ANL-SWP is now desperate to shrug off its white, woolly, liberal image and to reassure the rank and file that the organisation had not missed the boat in the anti-BNP campaign. SWP ANL participation in future events in the area will be carefully considered, and it is likely that the next big demonstration will be the subject of a full national call-out, especially if there is another serious racial incident locally. It is right, isn't it, that the October demonstration was the subject of a full national call-out?
Yes, that's right, that's right. But it was also, we wanted to unite all the different campaigns. It was called the Unity demonstration for that reason. We wanted it to be a mass demonstration because we thought it needed to be sufficiently large to bring in very large numbers of people and to be effective rather than a series of smaller or divided demonstrations that might happen otherwise.
Was there a feeling that the SWP had a white, woolly, liberal image that needed to be shaken off?
Well, I didn't think so. I don't think anybody in the SWP thought so. And I don't really think the undercover policing people thought so, given they spent so much time trying to say the opposite. So, no, I don't think that's realistic.
Thank you. I'd like to move now to some evidence about Brick Lane. It's tab B39A, sir, 24344, please. So this is a report about an event on the 26th of September 1993. The nature of the event is said to have been a mass paper sale at which 200 to 300 BNP supporters and 500 to 700 opposition were estimated. The likelihood of disorder is assessed as high, event opposed by anti-fascist organisations, and the mood violent, hostile to police. Could we go to page 3, please? feeling is running very high at present that the BNP can be driven from the streets of London. The bookshop continues to be the focal point for resentment, and the groundswell of opinion is that it must be destroyed. The means differs according to the propensity for violence amongst the various organisations. Was it the groundswell of opinion that the bookshop must be destroyed?
No, it was the groundswell that it should be closed down, it should be shut. If by destroyed you mean physically destroying it, that wasn't it was always close down the bookshop, shut down the BNP bookshop. Or people sometimes didn't call it bookshop or put it in inverted commas for obvious reasons, since it had very little to do with being a bookshop. But no, that was the sentiment, that we wanted it to close down, and we didn't. We certainly didn't talk about it must be destroyed. And the idea the means differs according to the propensity for violence among the various organisations. I mean, I don't know what on earth these different means were according to the propensity for violence. I mean, that wasn't the way in which the campaign was being organised.
Did different groups express different views as to how the bookshop should be dealt with?
I think everybody, and I don't want to speak obviously for other organisations, but I think everybody on the left wanted it closed down, wanted it so that it wouldn't be there anymore. It wouldn't be a centre of organising. Now, there are different ways you can do that. For example, ARA had the demonstration on the same day as the Welling demonstration in central London, and that was their means of doing it. Petitioning, going to the bookshop and physically being outside the bookshop, we thought was very important in terms of the campaign to close it down. And after all, it did get closed down the following year after the demonstration.
I'm going to move now to preparations for the October demonstration at Welling. We'll be moving back a couple of months in time initially to the first report about preparations, which is from June of 1993. So it's tab B36, 33239, please. We see from the first page that it's a report dated the 29th of June. It's about plans for the unity demonstration, presumably call that for the very reason you've just explained. And if we could go over the page to the Anti-Nazi League's leaflet, close down the BNP, National Unity Demonstration, Bexley, October the 16th, 1993. Since the Nazi BNP set up its headquarters in the Bexley area, there have been 4 racist murders. And in the last year in South East London, there has been a 210% increase in racist attacks. Since 1989, a local and national anti-racist organisation have lobbied Bexley Council 23 times and held 6 demonstrations. We believe now, more than ever, it is important that we have one huge, united demonstration to finally close down the Nazi BNP headquarters. And that encapsulates in a nutshell, doesn't it, the background to this march?
That's right, yes. And that was the aim of the march.
And the considerable strength of feeling.
Yes, and as it says here, the number of lobbies of the council, the demonstrations, the real fear that the racist attacks were going to continue and were becoming very, very normalised in that part of London.
Goes on to say the Anti-Nazi League is supporting, together with other anti-racist and anti-fascist organisations, a call for large demonstration in Bexley to close down the Nazi BNP headquarters. The demonstration will be led by the victims of racist violence and the family campaigns. So far, apart from the ANL, the following organisations and campaigns have agreed to be part of the unity demonstration: the Roland Adams Family Campaign, the Rohit Dugal Family Campaign, Indian Workers Association GB, YRE and Searchlight. The Lawrence family are currently in Jamaica, where Stephen is being buried. They will be contacted as soon as they return. How important was it to you to have families such as the Adams family and the Lawrence family on board?
Well, it obviously was very important. These were people who directly suffered as a result of this racism, and who, in each case, did a huge amount over subsequent period to campaign about their own children, but also more generally about the threat of the BNP and the danger of racist attacks. So yes, it was important to have them on board.
And in the result, was the Lawrence family involved?
No, I don't think they were. I think they were on the other demonstration, the Arrow demonstration.
Can we take that down, please? And can we go to a photograph? It's at tab A2, sir. 37102. This is a bookshop, isn't it?
Yeah.
And heavily fortified at the front.
Yeah, yeah.
Could we take that down, please? Could we have up 3801, tab B37, sir? Thank you. This is an event pro forma based on HN78's intelligence about that forthcoming demonstration on the 16th of October, lists the groups that were known to be involved. Numbers likely to attend. At this stage, the police are saying unable to assess. Likelihood of disorder, they are saying simply possible. Mood, vociferous. And it goes on then in the text to talk about the efforts that were being made to prepare for the event, and as you've confirmed earlier, that it would, so far as the SWP was concerned, be a national call-out. Can we go over the page, please? And we see there a list of the groups being involved as far as the police are concerned. To what extent were you personally involved in preparations for this march?
I was involved in sort of general discussions, but I wasn't involved in the detailed organising of the demonstration, but I was involved in some general discussions about it and about the nature of the mobilisation and what we were trying to do with it.
Presumably this would have been an item on the agenda at your weekly Central Committee meetings.
Certainly some of the time it would be, yes.
If we can move to the next report on preparations, which is from late September, it's 33343, that is, 7, tab B40, sir. So again, the headers show it's the same demonstration that's being reported on. By this stage, and this report is dated the 28th of September, the police estimate is numbers likely to attend 10 to 20,000, likelihood of disorder, serious widespread disorder and violence directed at BNP supporters and property and or police is to be expected. Mood, hostile, confrontational. So a considerable change from the last report.
Well, there's a considerable change in the reporting, but I wouldn't say there was a change in the attitude towards the demonstration.
It is indeed only the report. And let's look at some of the text. This demonstration is the first example of real solidarity amongst anti-racist, anti-fascist groups in recent times. The object of the exercise is primarily to force the closure of the BNP party headquarters and bookshop in Welling, and secondly, to speed the demise of the BNP altogether. The main participating groups are the ANL, Youth Against Racism in Europe, an emerging and successful group sponsored by Militant, Panther UK, the Direct Action Movement, Anti-Fascist Action, and various anarchist elements. Of these, the ANL will numerically be the largest. The ANL, as a wholly manipulated subsidiary of the Socialist Workers' Party, has committed enormous resources to this event in the hope of repeating the success of the original ANL, which defeated the National Front. Is all of that accurate?
What, the whole paragraph?
Yes.
Just let me have a look at it again. It's true, it was the object of the exercise was to close the headquarters. Yeah, they were the main groups. It's not true that the ANL is a wholly manipulated subsidiary of the SWP. That just simply, as we've discussed earlier, it was much wider than that. It contained many, many people who weren't members of the SWP. It is true that the SWP and the ANL both committed resources to this event because, as it says here, we saw what happened in the 1970s. The ANL was absolutely central to defeating the National Front in the late 1970s and was very, very important in doing so. We wanted to be able to do the same again in terms of Derek Beacon being a councillor, in terms of the existence of the headquarters in Welling, and that was why we put big resources into it. It's why we said it should be a national demonstration. It's why we did get coaches from up and down the country of people to go on the demonstration. We thought it was a political priority.
Why did the ARA decide to go it alone with a completely separate protest in a very different location?
Well, that's a question, again, you'd have to ask them. My assessment is that, again, this isn't the first or probably the last time these sorts of things happen, that people who generally might agree on the same goal don't agree on the tactics of how you do it. And they wanted to have something which was very far away from where the headquarters was, that it would be, as I remember it, it was in Trafalgar Square at the same time. And their aim was to have a demonstration which opposed the BNP but didn't actually deal with, in my view, what was the main concrete problem, which was that you should be able to say we want this bookshop closed down. So I think that's why they did it. It was much more, there were a whole number of MPs went on it. Ken Livingstone was on it, who was the Mayor of London no, he wasn't the Mayor of London at the time. He'd been in the GLC, obviously. He became the Mayor of London later on. He was quite instrumental in organising it, as I recall. So it was an attempt to have a separate demonstration which gathered people around the same issue, but without having any question of going near the bookshop. And
without the attendant risk of trouble.
Well, and without the numbers. I mean, there were 2,000 or 3,000 people on that demonstration. There were 60,000 in Welling. So I would argue that the vast majority of people did understand the importance of going to the bookshop. And you can actually have trouble on a demonstration in Trafalgar Square, as has happened. But, I take your point.
Okay. Next paragraph. Demonstrators will assemble at Wynns Common, Eltham, intending to march on the BNP bookshop. Whilst it has not been explicitly stated by organisers, the intention of the protesters is to attack the bookshop physically.
Who says? I mean, this is a report which has no basis in any fact, does it? While it's not been explicitly stated by the organisers, well, that's maybe because they didn't state it and didn't intend it to happen.
Could we go to the next page, please, to the top? ANL SWP organisers have discussed the possibility of police banning the demonstration. The resources committed to the event are so great that the event could not be cancelled, even if the organisers were inclined to do so, which they are not. The ANL SWP has printed or intends to print some 100,000 leaflets in the name of both the ANL and the Unity Group, and 50,000 placards for the event. Organisers publicly state that up to 50,000 people will attend the demonstration, and privately they are planning for 20,000. First of all, is the scale of the preparations accurately reflected there?
I can't believe for a minute that we had 50,000 placards. I mean, that is a lot of placards. I would have thought it's probably 5,000 would be the real figure there. I mean, if you had 50,000, that would be virtually one for every demonstrator, which seems not just unlikely, but seems slightly pointless, given lots of other people might have had their own placards. No, I think privately we thought it was much bigger than 20,000. I think I was expecting. I remember I went to Derby the week before to speak at a college there, and Derby, wasn't particularly known for a big, vibrant socialist organisation, but there was a full meeting. They got a coach down from Derby, mainly of young people. We knew it was going to be a very, very big demonstration. Now, assessing how big a demonstration is going to be is very difficult. I mean, you obviously know how many coaches there are going to be, but other than that, it's quite difficult to do. But we did know it was going to be very big, so I don't accept the 20,000 that we believe privately. I mean, maybe people said this to people, maybe said don't get your hopes up too much that it will be much bigger. But in reality, I think we thought it would be much closer to 50,000 than 20,000.
And had there been discussion about what would happen if the police banned the event?
Well, I think that we knew that the police might want to ban the event. We knew that there wasn't agreement at that stage about the route of the march and so on. So of course we would have considered it. But usually when a march is banned, it doesn't stop people, as again this report says, it doesn't stop people gathering or intending to gather. I mean, it might stop people coming from Derby, but it won't stop people from coming locally. So there would be a situation if they said, for example, you can't go within, 2 miles of the bookshop, then there would have been some sort of protest at the perimeter of that, which is one of the things that happen, for example, when you have these big demonstrations against the G8 or something, as we had in Scotland some years ago, that people go to the perimeter fence and go as close as they can to the banned area.
Thank you. Could we go on to the next paragraph? Furthermore, the ANL and other anti-racist organisations have been inspired by recent victories over the BNP in East London following the BNP council election success in Millwall. Anti-racists who were hitherto intimidated by and afraid of the much-vaunted BNP have seen that the fascists can be outnumbered and chased off the streets. The prospect of thousands of anti-fascists gathered together en masse will strengthen the resolve of the demonstrators to march on the BNP headquarters, whether this is banned or not, and to respond to police measures to enforce the ban or to protect the BNP bookshop with violence. It should be stressed that even elements within the SWP-ANL which have previously shunned violent confrontation are prepared for a fight this time. As an added complication, there is likely to be a large number of non-SWP, well-meaning ANL members who will be panicked as and when violence erupts. Is it right that even elements within the SWP ANL, which had previously shunned violent confrontation, were preparing for a fight on this occasion?
What I think people were determined to do was to close down the bookshop. They wanted to have a mass demonstration. They wanted it to be a demonstration which went past the headquarters. They wanted it to do all those sorts of things. I don't recognise this idea that people who previously shunned violent confrontation are prepared for a fight. People did want a fight to be able to march down that route. They did want to be able to close the bookshop down. They did think it was wrong that the BNP could intimidate people on the streets of East London or on the streets of South East London. So all those things are true. But this idea that suddenly people have gone from being, we don't want any violent confrontation, to now we're going to have a physical fight, I just don't think that's the way it happened. I also don't quite understand the following sentence seems to me a bit of a non sequitur, that there'll be a large number of well-meaning ANL members who will be panicked. Well, as and when, and so should we have violence? Shouldn't we have violence? It doesn't really make any of this clear.
I mean, as I understand it, the insinuation is that there was a recognition that there was going to be violence, but not everybody was in on the plan, and there were therefore going to be some people who would be surprised and panicked. Is that what happened?
No, because I think everybody who went on that demonstration knew it would be heavily policed. I think everybody who went on it knew that it would be a demonstration that the police didn't want us to have. They knew all that, regardless of their politics and regardless of where they came from politically. But I think there was a very strong feeling among the SWP, but also among many other people, including the as they're described, well-meaning ANL members, that this was something they had to do, and it was very, very important for them to do. And there wasn't a plan by a small number of SWP to foment violence, which would then panic the ANL members. That would have been an irresponsible thing to do. I mean, you can't take people on a demonstration and not want to make sure that they're safe and not want to make sure that they're looked after. You know, you had all these people, you had families, you had people coming from all around the country, and it descended into a complete attack by the police, which no doubt we'll come on to. But it was a very, very frightening demonstration, and in that situation, the last thing that we wanted to do was to create a situation where people would be panicked. That would have been quite wrong.
Could we move now to the next page, page 3, to the third paragraph down, please? Amongst the demonstrators will be sizable contingents of militant activists whose intention is to confront police. These will take any opportunity to inflame the situation and to provoke violence. The militant activists will include members of militant and other well-disciplined groups which are capable of effective action. The total number of these militants will probably be in the region of 3,000. Was there a sense that there might be significant numbers of what I might term hotheads?
Well, I don't think calling them hotheads is quite right. When it says militant activists, yes, this is true about a whole number of left groups and a whole number of individuals. But the idea that they went on it with the intention to confront the police is not actually why people went on that demonstration. They went on the demonstration as a statement against the BNP, as a statement in favour of closing down the headquarters, and that was the aim of the operation. And you know, this kind of sense all the time from these reports that people are always just outside agitators, that they're always doing these sorts of things. I mean, if you look, I mean, historians will just regard this stuff with incredible, you know, they'll find it amazing because it's always how major social movements are portrayed. It's how the suffragettes were portrayed, that there were outside agitators, or there's people who are militant who want to cause trouble. Actually, there are a whole range of people in these protests who have different reasons for being there, but all of them are united in that they're there for the purpose of the demonstration, not as a means of having a fight with the police or anybody else.
Thank you. Could we take that down, please? And could we have up 33058, which is tab 41 of your bundle, sir? This is moving into early October now. This report is dated the 5th of October. It's also on the theme of preparations for the demonstration. If we could start, please, with paragraph 1. You see the report is directed to estimated numbers, reporting the number of coaches that are being arranged and so forth. And if we move now to paragraph 2, it describes how those numbers are said to be being obtained. SWP branches are recruiting the supporters from local ethnic organisations, many of whom resent the party but will accept the cheap transport. Trade unions and colleges. The party is pushing the event as the biggest anti-racist demonstration since the 1970s. Another important aspect of the campaign is recruitment through A&L stalls, events, meetings and leafleting sessions. On Friday, the 8th of October, the A&L intends to distribute 150,000 leaflets in London alone, seeking support for the march. This portrays all the stops being pulled out to maximise numbers. Is that fair?
That's a fair point to make. We wanted to get as many people on it as possible.
And then if we go to the next paragraph, the frenetic campaigning is bringing to light some interesting developments within the A&L SWP. Usually the day-to-day running of the A&L is left to Rahul Patel and Claire Dissington. Of late, SWP Central Committee member Julie Waterson has been taking a greater part in such mundane activities and has brought in extra volunteer helpers to supplement the usual staff of privacy, privacy, privacy and privacy. The A&L has gained 2,000 new members since the BNP election victory in Millwall, but despite wildly enthusiastic press reports planted by the SWP, it remains in deep financial trouble. All the A&L has is riding on a powerful showing on the 16th of October. Was there a sense that the credibility of the A&L was at stake?
No, I don't think in the sense it's all riding on a powerful showing. We knew we wanted to have a very big and hopefully successful demonstration on the 16th of October. But the idea that the A&L would have been finished if there wasn't going to be a powerful showing isn't right. Plus, even the lower assessments, which in some of the other reports show that people thought there would be 15, 20, 25,000, which would have been a perfectly decent demonstration. So I don't think it was worried about that. And I don't quite understand about the deep financial trouble. I mean, most left campaigning organisations are not, well financed a lot of the time. So, but it wasn't particularly in deep financial trouble, to the best of my knowledge.
In terms of the level of leadership, is it right that Julie Waterson, Central Committee member, was taking a greater role than normal?
I should think so, yes, because she was the secretary of the A&L, but also if she left the day-to-day work to other people some of the time, that would be in a period of less intense organising and work. Now, obviously, as we've just seen, in the run-up to Welling, there was a lot of work going on, of booking coaches, of doing leaflets, of doing all those sorts of things. So, yes, she would have been.
If we move on to paragraph 4, please. Another SWP Central Committee member, Chris Banbury, has been drafted in to lead the A&L at demonstrations leading up to the big one. It seems that SWP policy towards street activity is being blurred. The SWP officially will not incite street violence, whereas committed A&L activists like Privacy and Privacy, both of whom are reformed fascists, believe that the BNP can only be beaten by physical combat, it would appear that Banbury, at least in private, shares these sentiments which directly contradict SWP policy. It seems likely that Julie Waterson has been sent to the ANL to temper some of Banbury's very noticeable and public deviations from the party line exhibited at recent demonstrations. Had Mr. Banbury very noticeably and publicly deviated from the party line on violence at recent demonstrations?
Not to my knowledge, and I think that, Chris was on the Central Committee, I was, Julie was, so I would have been party to any discussions they had in general terms, not on the day-to-day running, but I would have been party to those, and I would have known if he was saying something very, very different from anybody else. I think this is yet again the attempt is really to say the SWP officially will not incite street violence, whereas, well, I mean, I think this idea that we would have been influenced by two ANL activists, both of whom were reformed fascists, is simply not. That really would not have happened, and I don't think that makes sense. That when you look at this, I think you have to say that Chris Banbury was not doing anything different from Julie in any fundamental way or from anybody else. And indeed, even this report says that Chris Banbury, at least in private, shares these sentiments. Well, who has he shared these with? What has he actually said? It doesn't say. And certainly Julie was not sent to the ANL to temper some of his so-called noticeable and public deviations, because as I recall it, she was the person responsible for the ANL. He did a whole amount of work around the demonstration and maybe other things as well. But he wasn't organisationally, to the best of my recollection, part of the ANL sort of structure, if you like.
Did you ever hear Mr. Banbury in the run-up to the demonstration express any violent sentiments?
No, I didn't. The whole point, I'm sorry to sort of labour the point, but the whole point was we wanted a mass demonstration. We wanted to close down the bookshop. We didn't believe that the fascists should be able to operate openly on the streets. All of those were things that everybody in the SWP shared. There wasn't a difference in any of those sorts of things. So, no, I didn't. And yet again, we've got Banbury is fascinated by Trotsky's leadership of the Red Army. Well, as I said earlier, the idea that it's comparable, one demonstration in Welling with what went on for 2 years in Russia, I think this is very, very slanted reporting. I think this guy has a problem with Chris Banbury, which I don't know what it's about, but he's constantly trying to make out that he's somehow different from the rest of the SWP leadership. And actually, Chris was a very sort of powerful speaker, and he was quite a gregarious person at that level. He was also extremely loyal and disciplined about how he operated within the SWP. So I can assure you he wouldn't have done anything which broke from what the rest of us wanted him to do.
Could we move to the next paragraph, please? It is an open secret among central ANL activists that the object of the exercise on the 16th of October is to attack and attempt to destroy the BNP bookshop in Welling. Many are urging Rahul Patel to state this objective publicly, who has so far wisely declined. What is clear is that the hardliners at the heart of the ANL have won a commitment by leaders to allow and to encourage a violent confrontation with police on the day. This is because the ANL, having committed itself to cooperation with Youth Against Racism in Europe, will be unable to survive as a viable anti-fascist organisation which will attract members and therefore money, unless it is seen to be at least as militant as the other participating groups at the demonstration on the 16th of October. If it were to restrain itself, the ANL would lose its position as the leading anti-Nazi group. The ANL has, by cooperating in this event, abandoned the non-confrontational middle ground to its rival anti-racist alliance, which is committed to the removal of the BNP by peaceful means. Was it an open secret that the bookshop was to be attacked and destroyed?
Not only wasn't it an open secret, it's completely untrue. It's completely untrue. The aim of the operation was not to destroy the bookshop.
Did you hear anybody in the run-up to the demonstration itself express the view that the bookshop should be physically attacked?
No, I didn't. And to be honest, if they had said that to me, I would have said, well, that's not a possibility. If you look at the picture that you've shown of the bookshop, it was actually like a bunker. It was heavily reinforced. There was no way that you could do anything like that. It just simply wasn't realistic. And I would say to people two things if anybody had said that to me. I would say, firstly, it's not physically possible, but secondly, it's not politically desirable, because politically, as I hope I've tried to get across today, the whole aim of the SWP was to build mass organisations, was to build much, much bigger organisations than just ourselves, so that large numbers of people would demonstrate and would do all those sorts of things. And the idea of going and physically destroying the bookshop was quite anathema to those sorts of ideas. It simply wasn't what we were about doing. And we recognised this. We recognised it earlier with our break politically from the people who did want to do some of these sorts of things. And we were very, very much committed to not going along that road at any stage.
Could we go to the next paragraph, please? This is the first mention of something which is going to come back as a theme for a little while now. Central ANL activists are already planning tactics for life after the big demonstration. They anticipate that the BNP will be seriously damaged by events in Welling on the 16th of October, and the ANL will be well placed to kick the BNP whilst it is down. A network of about 70 hitters, which can be called upon to defend provocative ANL street activity against right-wing opposition, has been proposed and has been reasonably well received. Other plans are being discussed. Had, at that stage, anybody, to your knowledge, proposed setting up a network of hitters?
I've never heard that word in this context before I read these documents. It's not a word that I ever heard anybody in the SWP refer to, and it's not a word I can imagine that any of them would have referred to. So that's the first point. The second point is that actually, again, it wasn't our idea of how we should confront the BNP. We did think that the BNP would be seriously damaged by events in Welling, and that was because the size of the demonstration would have been overwhelming compared to what the BNP could get, and that was very, very important. We did think we'd be able to continue to campaign against them afterwards, and we would be able to go much, much more on the offensive politically. But the idea that that would take the form of 70 people going around engaged in street activity against the fascists is just simply not the way that we thought it should go.
Taking away the label hitter, had there been any discussion about how the SWP was going to protect its members from violent fascists?
What we've always done and what we continue to do, and this isn't just with fascists, it comes up at in other instances some of the time, we have a very serious commitment to proper stewarding of demonstrations and to having people who are responsible for making sure the demonstration goes in the way that we want it to go. And of course, one of the things that would involve is that you would try to protect your members and the demonstration from attacks by the far right or anybody else. But that is a very different thing from talking about a network of people who could be called upon to defend provocative street activity. It's completely different. It's a completely different concept, actually.
Were there discussions at this time when you are clearly going head-to-head with violent right-wingers about stewarding or defending your members in any other way from physical attack?
Well, this amounts to the same thing. That would be that you were defending them from physical attack. I mean, we had a whole number of people who were attacked. We've had attacks on our buildings at various points. I mean, not just in this period, but going back to the 70s and so on. We've had different attacks, and we've always tried to do it in a way which obviously tries to keep people safe, but which also does look at it in a political way rather than just simply some kind of tit-for-tat fighting, which what we understood from the late 70s was this was absolutely the wrong tactic to develop, and it was completely counterproductive.
Was there any move in the autumn of 1993 to identify people who might be more physically able to defend the SWP from attack?
We didn't really approach it like that. I mean, I think, as I said earlier, Julie was about 5 foot tall. She was a very small woman. She was absolutely key to our stewarding operation. She wasn't, we didn't think about it in terms of we want people who can defend themselves. We talked about it in terms of certainly physically helping to defend people, but also in terms of a political campaign against the BNP, which was by far the most important thing. And the Welling demonstration was a move towards doing that, and actually did result the following year in Bexley Council closing down the bookshop, and we regarded that as a success. And I think it was a great success.
Can we now go to 436, tab B42, sir? We're now moving to the 8th of October. This is a short but important report. At a recent closed meeting of the Socialist Workers' Party, branch leadership of the 6 Hackney district branches, Central Committee member Chris Bambury, in the presence of fellow Central Committee member Lindsey German, addressed the comrades present on the issue of building for the 16th of October demonstration to close down the British National Party bookshop in Welling. He spoke in no uncertain terms of his intention to tear the building down and that no one was going to stop him. He believed that there were many others who thought as he did and that the party must obtain their support. Was there a closed meeting of SWP branch leadership of the 6 Hackney district branches shortly before the 8th of October?
Well, there will have been. They were called district committees, and they happened on a regular basis all over the country. And
were you and Mr. Bambury both present?
I don't remember being at it, but I did many, many meetings at the time, and it's possible we were both present because, although slightly unusual, I would have thought, but maybe we felt that we wanted to get more of a mobilisation from Hackney, so that's why we both went along.
Did Mr. Banbury say in no uncertain terms that he intended to tear the building down or anything remotely like that?
Well, as I say, I don't remember being at the meeting, so I don't remember whether he said it or not. But let me just point out that I think if he or anybody else came into a room and said to me, I'm going to tear the building down, you know, brick by brick or whatever, and no one is going to stop me, I would have regarded that as hyperbole. I mean, it's simply everybody would know he's not going to tear the building down on his own, and that no one was going to stop him. It's obviously that he is making the point that the bookshop should be closed. He believed there were many others who thought as he did, and it's absolutely true. There were many other people who wanted the bookshop to close and who saw it as a source of violent and racist attacks. But that clearly, I mean, you've got to be very gullible to think that's a literal statement of fact, haven't you?
I mean, he was a powerful orator, wasn't he?
He's a good speaker, yeah, but in a district committee, there's only limited oratory possibilities. You know, it's not like speaking at a big rally or something.
I'm understanding your evidence to be that he might have said this, but he wasn't to be taken literally.
And I don't believe that anybody, apart from HN 78, would have taken it literally. And I doubt that he did, to tell the truth. I mean, it's just one of those things that people say, in particular, flourishes, if you like, which everybody will know does not mean exactly what it says.
Isn't there a problem, though, with using that sort of language that some people might take it literally?
Of course, that may be a problem, but if you look at the second paragraph, what's the conclusion from this district committee? You've got to go around schools, further education colleges, blah, blah, the local council, and you're going to forge links with Turkish organisations, which is about a leaflet, giving out leaflets, talking to trade unions. I mean, it doesn't exactly match with the idea that he's going to physically tear it down.
Can we go to the next page of this, please? Source comment. It is now beyond doubt that the hardliners in the ANL-SWP who want street confrontation with the BNP have won the internal policy battle for the course of action on the 16th of October. The official position is now to drive through police lines and attempt to destroy the BNP bookshop. This position has been reiterated in a coded fashion in the week's party notes, the weekly information circular for SNP members, which states, on the 16th, we know where the Nazis are going to be, and we are going to confront them in their bunker. Which part, if any, of that paragraph do you agree with?
Well, I don't agree that it's beyond doubt the hardliners, so-called, who've won an internal policy battle. There was one policy from the SWP, and it was absolutely clear. Now, the statement from the circular says, we know where the Nazis are going to be, and we're going to confront them in their bunker. Seems to me that's absolutely obvious. What it's saying there is that I mean, the bunker is obviously a reference to Hitler's bunker as well as theirs. And what it's saying is we are going to directly go to their headquarters, and we are going to be outside the headquarters. Actually, if the march had been allowed to go down there, that it would have surrounded the headquarters, it would have done all of those sorts of things. So I think that's, I think it's very clear that is not a coded thing that we're going to tear down the headquarters. It is saying that we are going to physically go to where the headquarters are, and we are going to confront them by being there in tens of thousands rather than in a few hundred. And the official position, actually, if we look at what happens on the day, the official position was not to drive through police lines and attempt to destroy the BNP bookshop. People wanted to do that. They wanted to go on that route, but actually, in the end of the day, what happened when they did get to Welling was that Julie Waterson said the demonstrators should sit down. Now, sitting down is not physically confronting, driving through police lines or anything else.
Could we take that down, please? And could we have up 439, so that's B43. This document is also the 8th of October. And we're back on hitters. An idea proposed by certain members of the ANL National Office staff during a recent internal meeting regarding the formation of a contact network to enable the ANL to swiftly assemble 70 street fighters for security purposes appears to have been sanctioned by an individual or individuals within the controlling Socialist Workers' Party SWP Central Committee. It was stated that this unit would by no means be squadist in mentality and would not necessarily only consist of ANL SWP members, as it was mentioned that, for example, members of Youth Against Racism in Europe could also play a part. It is intended that this would be drawn up of those, quote, who would not run away when confronted by Nazis. Stopping there, if a decision of the kind asserted there had been made, would you, as a member of the SWP Central Committee, have expected to have been aware of it?
It doesn't seem to me that there was a decision made. It says there was an idea proposed by certain members. And it then goes on clearly to say that it was stated this unit would not be squadist, because that was one of the things that people were worried about. But I would say categorically that this was an idea which would not have been accepted and was not accepted, and as far as I recall, wasn't discussed by the Central Committee itself, and they would not have supported this kind of approach. I mean, I can't obviously comment on whether it actually was said or not, but it says here it's an idea.
Yeah, it says an idea at the top, and then a few lines down it says appears to have been sanctioned.
Yeah, appears to have been sanctioned by an individual.
What I was driving at, if there had been any sanction, would you have expected to have been aware of it? That's my first question.
Yes, I would expect to have been aware of it, which is why I think there wasn't a sanction by anybody.
That, I think, answers my second question. Thank you. I think we can take that down now and move on to tab 44, 33764. I beg your pardon, 33024. Yeah, this one's a little bit difficult to read. Just below the bit you've blown up, there's a date. I'd just like to have that, please. Thank you. I think it says the 12th of October, 1993 there, so 4 days before the demonstration. If we could return to the text you'd blown up, please. Mark Metcalf of the HAFC is expecting up to 100 anti-fascists from Holland and Germany to come to the anti-BNP demonstration on Saturday. He says that these will be seasoned fighters who are used to physical confrontations. Metcalf also believes that about 50 members of Anti-Fascist Action, AFA, will come to London from Liverpool for the occasion. The HAFC thinks that the BNP will not try to oppose the march in Welling, but that it will attack either the Anti-Racist Alliance march in Westminster or the anarchist book fair at Conway Hall. Metcalfe also thinks that BNP supporters will be in Brick Lane after the main event on Saturday evening. He will be attempting to persuade as many of the Liverpool and European contingents as possible to go to Brick Lane on Saturday night and again on Sunday morning to confront the fascists. Did you hear anything at all about Dutch and German anti-fascists who were seasoned fighters planning to attend on the 16th?
No, I didn't, and or certainly not to the best of my recollection. And as far as I can see, they don't have anything to do with the SWP.
Were there seasoned Dutch and German anti-fascist fighters there on the day?
I don't know. There may well have been, but I didn't. I mean, on a big demonstration, there are all sorts of people that you might not come across, and certainly in Welling, there were a huge number of people I didn't come across because there was such chaos. So I have no idea whether they were there or not.
Thank you. Could we take that down and have up, please, 33764? This is also dated the 12th of October. This is a report we can see from the bottom left of a different officer, HN 101. It says, SWP leaders confident that the Anti-Nazi League, ANL, will be sufficiently strong on the day, will allow the party to be represented in its own right on Saturday. This means that there will be a separate SWP presence with its own leadership, banners, etc. In command on the day will be Chris Bambury, who is eager for a confrontation. Is it right, first of all, that there were separate ANL and SWP presences on the day?
I really, I'm not sure, because this suggests a contingent of SWP on the demonstration, and I'm not sure that actually happened. It may, it quite often happened on demonstrations that you did have an SWP contingent to promote the paper and promote particular slogans and so on. I'm not sure it did happen on that day, and certainly SWP members were all over the place on that demonstration because of the way in which it was attacked. So I couldn't say for certain about that.
We've seen a number of documents which talk about Mr. Bambury's appetite for violence expressed in various ways. This one uses the word confrontation, which I accept doesn't necessarily connote violence. Would you have described Mr. Bambury as eager for a confrontation of some kind?
Well, it depends what it means. If it means that he wants to be able to get to the bookshop and to demonstrate in the way that we wanted to do, then maybe. If it means he's eager for a confrontation either by the allegation that he was going to single-handedly tear the building down or that he wanted to have a fight with the police, well, no, I'd say that wasn't the truth. I mean, what we wanted to do was to weaken and ultimately destroy the BNP. That was the aim of the operation, and that was certainly at the forefront of his mind.
The rest of the document may shed a little bit of light on what the officer understood, because it goes on to say SWP members have been led to understand that the route of the march will take them within 300 yards of the British National Party headquarters, and it is their feeling that this will be close enough for them to make a final assault on the premises, which police will be helpless to prevent given the mood of the demonstrators and their numbers. Could you help us, at that stage, 4 days before the march, What was your understanding of the route that the demonstration would take? And in particular, would it get to within 300 yards or thereabouts of the bookshop?
What we wanted originally was a route which went past the bookshop. Now it became increasingly clear that the police weren't going to allow that, and I think by that stage they'd already put a Section 12 on the demonstration, which prevented people from deviating from the prescribed route that they gave them. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know the geography there very well. I know that at the end, the final route was that we would have to turn left into Lodge Hill, but that, as it turned out on the day, which people were very unhappy about, they didn't want to do it. And it says here that Youth Against Racism actually wanted to have protests about police stations to protest about it beforehand. People were very unhappy they couldn't go to the headquarters. But as it turned out, we weren't even allowed to go on the route that the police had prescribed for us. So it was very unsatisfactory. So the question of whether SWP members thought they were going to be within 300 yards, I think that Lodge Hill was a bit further away from the bookshop than that. But as I say, I'm not sufficiently apprised of the geography around there.
Here we have a second officer reporting that there was to be an assault on the premises.
Well,
was that in fact what was planned?
It says a final assault on the premises. I mean, this comes from the officers. It's nowhere in any publicly stated. It wasn't something that people talked about. It was people wanted to close down the headquarters. And I'm afraid, I think that I think there's a combination of wanting to make it look as though there was more projected violence than was the case, a combination of them wanting to show that they had information which nobody else had, and I also have to say a misunderstanding of our politics, which I think comes through time and time again in many of these reports, that they don't understand what is meant by we want to close down the bookshop. They immediately see it as something which is a small number of people engaged in physical violence. Well, that wasn't the aim of the operation.
Was there, as is one of the officers suggests, a tactic whereby senior members of the SWP were protected from being implicated in plans for violence which actually did exist?
No, not that I know of. Where? Sorry, is that in this bit?
No, it's one of the officers alleges. It's not from this particular document.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they allege a load of things which are very dubious, about these sorts of things.
Thank you. Can we move now to the 16th of October itself? And it might help if we start with some maps. So these, sir, are your tabs C2A 37118. We've got extracts from two different contemporaneous A to Zs. So the cover of the first one, which I might describe as the low resolution map, is here on page 1. If we could go to page 3, please. This page I am not displaying just because it shows some of the nicest walking in Kent just outside London, but because it has the date on the bottom of the page, 1993. If we could go to page 4, please. This is southeast London, and if we could just orientate ourselves approximately in the middle of the page, you will see Welling. Do you have that?
Yep.
If we go directly north of Welling, we see Thamesmead, don't we? Right at the top. You'll have to go back to where you were. That's it. Thamesmead is immediately south of the river. That was where Roland Adams was murdered, isn't it? Not very far north of Welling. If we come back out and we look to the west of Welling, we will see Eltham, just west, and Eltham Station's a little bit south. Do you see that? That's where Stephen Lawrence was murdered, isn't it? We have Welling Station, and just to the going up north from just after Welling Station is Upper Wickham Lane. The BMP bookshop is on Upper Wickham Lane, isn't it?
Yeah.
And perhaps if we move now on that page, perhaps we can also follow the railway lines. There are two railway lines running through this part of southeast London. One is the one that runs through Woolwich, Plumstead, Abbeywood, Belvedere, Erith, and out to Dartford that way. Presumably lots of people got to the start of the march by travelling to Plumstead Station on that line.
Maybe, yes.
The other line is the one that comes through from Eltham and go through Welling, Bexley Heath, Barnhurst, and then on to Dartford. And Welling railway station is actually physically the closest to the BMP bookshop, isn't it? If we could go now to page 7. And this is the higher resolution map. Again, we can see from the bottom of the page that it's 1993. And if we could go to page 10, please. Right at the top of the page where the letter B is, there is a junction. On this resolution of map, the junction is between Upper Wickham Lane and Lodge Hill, with Oakhampton Crescent as well. Do you see the junction?
Yeah.
Is that the junction where essentially the march met police barriers blocking Wickham Lane to the south, Lodge Hill to the north, and Oakhampton Crescent to the east?
That's right.
And we'll be coming to that in due course, with the Plumstead Cemetery to the left of marchers as they were moving up Upper Wickham Lane from Plumstead.
Yeah.
Perhaps if we go back a page to page 9, and we should pick up there the beginning of the march, if we concentrate on the lower quarter of that page. We've got Wickham Lane coming from Plumstead High Street through to the junction that I've just referred to. And is it right that demonstrators met just at the bottom of that lane at Winds Common?
Yes, that's right. Winds Common was where it started.
Which is immediately to the left of where it says Wickham in the largest capital letters. If we could perhaps keep up page 10, please. It might help also just if we could really expand up Upper Wickham Lane, the section that is close to Welling Station. That and just a little bit north. I'm looking at the numbers, the road numbers. The bookshop was at 154, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we can see 64, number 64 marked just at the end of the word upper, and 240 marked just after the M in Wickham. Was the bookshop very approximately, looking at the side roads, around where Church Street and East Street are?
I guess so. I mean, I'm not an expert.
If you're not
on,
able to say, just
Yeah.
say so. Thank you. Could you help us? You told us before the break that by the time the police had made the Section 12 order, the route was going to involve you going up Wickham Lane, but then having to divert left and not being able to walk past the bookshop. The actual route that you took, and perhaps if we could scroll out a bit, please. When you got to the top of Upper Wickham Lane and to the junction with Lodge Hill and Oakhampton Crescent, you've given evidence that all three of those exits from that junction were blocked.
That's right.
Where did the demonstration go?
Well, it wanted to go up Lodge Hill, but that was blocked. So the people at the front obviously couldn't go back. I mean, you couldn't go backwards. There were too many people.
I'll come to the detail, the detail of the disorder in a moment, but I'm just interested at the moment, when people disperse, ultimately, is anybody able to go down Lodge Hill, or do people essentially have to retreat back the way they came?
No, what happened was, I can only speak from my own experience. Obviously, people had different experiences, but when we got to that point, it was absolute mayhem. It was already blocked. I myself had to people were falling over walls, they were being pushed over walls. I remember going through the cemetery, I remember it very well, and when I got to the other side, it was like a kind of medieval battle, the whole, people were sitting on the side of the hill, there was a lot of people with wounds and injuries and with blood on their faces and on their clothes and all that kind of thing. And essentially, people just had to make their way. And I don't know this part of London at all well. People had to make their way to, I think I must have gone further up through the cemetery, over this hill, and then further up to, I think it probably was the top of Lodge Hill, and then got on the road at the top there and somehow found a station. I mean, people were going, some people will have gone back, people at the very back may have just turned back. That wasn't an option for most people because they thought they could get through to Lodge Hill, and that was completely blocked off to them by the police from the very beginning. So it was a trap. There was no way out for people on any of those roads.
Okay, I'm going to dial back now to the start of the day. Can you recall broadly when you arrived and how you got there?
I must have come by train. I would have got there probably an hour before the starting point, starting time, and there were some speeches at the beginning there. So I would have got there about that time, I guess, 12, something like that.
The report, the SDS report of the event itself, estimates the SWP turnout at around 3,000 to 4,000 people. Is that an estimate that you would agree with?
It's certainly a reasonable estimate. It's a possibility. It's very hard to tell how many SWP, but there would have been very many SWP on it. People came down on coaches, people from London, obviously.
Did Mr. Banbury attempt to reach the BNP bookshop before the march started?
No.
When you say no, do you mean you can help us with evidence that confirms he did not, or do you mean that you don't know?
Well, he was on the demonstration. He wasn't at the bookshop, so I know that. I saw him on the demonstration.
When did you first see Mr. Banbury on the day?
I don't know, I can't remember that time. But it would have been early on because we were all there before the march started, as is normal with big marches, that all the people organising them turn up quite early.
Did he say anything to you in the morning about having not been able to stop at Welling Station?
No, he didn't say anything about that. I mean, is this a reference to this allegation that he was trying to burn the place down and that he would have done if he hadn't gone to Welling Station?
Yes, I'm asking whether he said anything of that ilk to you.
As I recall, talking to him and Julie on the morning of the demonstration, we were all extremely worried about. We knew there were very, very large numbers. We knew that the police were blocking off this route, or we thought they were going to block off the route. And we were talking about how are we going to handle the demonstration. I don't think he said anything at all about whether he got off at Welling or not.
Did he say anything about having done any form of reconnaissance?
No, he didn't.
Do you know whether anybody attempted to reach the bookshop before the main march began?
Not that I know of, but it would have been a remarkable thing to have done on the morning of a demonstration like that, because what I do know from extensive experience on demonstrations is that the police are always in attendance very early on. They're there when your stewards get there. They're there from sometimes much earlier than that, depending on the demonstration and so on. So I can't see why anybody would have gone or attempted to go to the bookshop before the march started, because you would have been well aware that there would be a police presence there.
Was there a stewards meeting involving both Socialist Workers' Party and YRE stewards?
Almost certainly, but I don't recall it.
Would you have been involved in it or not?
I probably would have been involved in it, but not necessarily. I mean, Julie said to me before the march started, she said, would I come up near the front so that if she wanted to ask me questions about tactics or wanted any help with anything, that would I be around? And actually, as time went on, I got sort of pushed back. It was because of the crowd and everything. So I wasn't absolutely at the front. But so I would say from that probably I wasn't an official. Well, I wasn't an official steward. I know that, and I probably wasn't at the stewards' meeting.
You referred earlier in your evidence to Julie Waterson wanting there to be a sit-down protest. When can you recall her first expressing that wish?
I think that came about when we became aware, and as other organisations became aware, that we weren't going to be able to go down Lodge Hill. We couldn't go down, they'd already said, you're not going to go down Upper Wickham Lane. We wanted to go down there, but we recognised that actually if the police had blocked all that off, it wasn't going to be possible to do that. So then what we wanted to do was go up Lodge Hill. And I think the whole idea of the sit-down was in protest of the fact that we weren't given any route at all, or we weren't given a route that certainly we weren't given a route we were satisfied with. That was the first question. But the whole question of should we do a sit-down was something Julie proposed. Other people had other ideas, other organisations and other people had other ideas. But this was something that we came to as a means of protest, which didn't actually involve a whole-scale battle with the police. But the police were absolutely determined to have that battle, and that's why they closed off Lodge Hill.
Did the YRE want to force the police line by having people link arms?
I think they wanted to link arms and see whether we could get through. And I think there was a discussion about whether that was appropriate or whether the sit-down would be a better thing to do. But I can't be absolutely certain how much, that's something you'd obviously have to ask them about what their actual position was and what their tactic was.
Can you remember how that difference of opinion was resolved?
Well, it sounds to me like what happened was as soon as people sat down, which obviously some people do, and that presumably at that stage the YRE certainly weren't against sitting down, even if it wasn't their favoured tactic. It was at that point that the police start charging with horses, they had twice as many horses at Welling as they had at Orgreave, which is incredible. They had 83 horses according to the official figures, and people in riot gear. It was an absolutely terrifying demonstration.
I'd like to take you to the point where you're walking towards the junction. Was it obvious that there were a lot of police officers at that junction?
It was very obvious, but by this time I was a bit of a way back, so I wasn't right at the front with people. And what became more and more obvious was we were just blocked. We couldn't get through. And that was becoming more and more apparent. So we were all standing there saying, what's going on? And of course, nobody in those days had mobile phones or anything. So you had much less ability to communicate with people right at the front.
And is it right that the police were on the higher ground?
Yes, and they were sort of looking down on people, plus they had all the horses.
In terms of riot gear, is it right that the officers at the front were not equipped with riot gear, but others were?
I wasn't at the front, so I couldn't say categorically, but virtually all the police that I saw were with shields, with horses, with all those things. And that was witnessed by the level of injury of the demonstrators. There was a high level of injury.
Was the geography such that it was quite a narrow, confined space, given the number of people involved?
Yes, it was. And as I said, the way out for us was that people tried to get over walls. Part of the wall collapsed into the cemetery. There were other people sort of falling or jumping maybe over garden walls, people's private garden walls, because there was a crush and you couldn't get through.
There is evidence that the fighting was started by some anarchists. Are you in a position to help us with whether or not that is true?
I wasn't at the front, so I couldn't say categorically that it was a group of anarchists or whoever. But I do know that the police were determined here to have a confrontation. And that, to me, in a way, it's always, this group of people started it or that group of people started it. But actually, there was no question the police were determined not to let that demonstration happen. And I think they wanted to actually send a signal to the many, many young people who came on the demonstration that demonstrations are very frightening things and don't do it again. And that maybe had an effect on some people.
There's evidence that the YRE stewards suffered, and I'm quoting, considerable casualties. Are you able to help us with whether or not that is true?
I'm sure they did, because I think that many of the stewards were injured. Julie was taken to hospital, had stitches in her head. You can see photographs of her she had a white jacket on, which was blood-stained. And there were lots of people, as I said. I saw people when I was moving across from the cemetery up the hill, that you saw lots of people sitting on the ground injured. It was a remarkable sight, really.
There's also evidence that there was an especially high casualty rate amongst the Kingsway anti-fascist group stewards. Are you in a position to help us with whether that's true or not?
I don't know about them, I'm afraid.
There's also a suggestion that demonstrators were hit from behind by missiles thrown by demonstrators who were behind them. Did that happen? Well,
this is what HN78 said about Julie's injury, but that was totally false. And she wasn't hit from behind. She was hit by a police truncheon in front of her.
Are you able to say that as on the basis of what she told you or what you witnessed?
On the basis of what she told me, but also on the basis of the subsequent settlement that she got.
We know that there were various charges by the police during the course of the day. Could you give us an idea of how close you were to any of those?
Well, pretty close. We were all quite close to it, because they didn't just charge the front lines. They began to come forward and charge other people. They chased people who were trying to get away. They did all those sorts of things, so I was fairly close to that and could see it very, very closely.
As someone who was present, could you just give us an idea of what it felt like to be close to one of those charges?
It's a very, very frightening thing. I've been on 2 demonstrations where somebody's been killed. One was in Red Lion Square, one was in Genoa in 2001 against the G8. And in both of them, you know something very bad is likely to happen. You see great formations of riot police and you see all these sorts of things. And I think it was extremely fortunate that nobody was killed at Welling, because we had the same kind of attack from the police that we'd had at those other demonstrations. So it was an extremely frightening thing. People were panicking. There were lots of people who'd never been on a demonstration before. I had a friend who brought her teenage sons, who said that it really made them quite frightened to go on other demonstrations. Subsequently, lots of people had no idea where they were, people who'd come from all over the country. The march it never came to a conclusion in that sense. It just sort of broke up because such was the scale of the violence and the attacks from the police. So that was what it was like. And as I say, it felt to you like you were in a battlefield where you were just trying to get off the battlefield in one piece, really, and as quickly as you could.
I'd like to take you now to the SDS report of the event. So it's tab B45, it's 25694. This date, you can see from the date and the title that it's about this demonstration. It says numbers present 15 to 20,000. Is that an estimate that you would agree with?
No, it was much bigger than that. We usually say 60,000. I'd say 50, 60,000. I mean, there were something like 500 coaches, which already puts it above that figure, leaving aside people who got there by other means.
If we could look at the last 2 paragraphs on the first page, please. It says the prescription of a route by police, coupled with the reported presence of some 7,000 police officers, convinced leaders on the morning of the march that it would be impossible to reach the bookshop. Is that right?
Well, it didn't just convince people on the morning of the march. They accepted that they didn't agree with the prescription of the route. They wanted to be able to go there, but they accepted that given the whole situation, they wouldn't be able to do that. So they looked for alternatives, and the alternatives were they had the sit down, the linking of arms, those kind of things. But I can't stress too much how this was something which I think the police very, very much determined would happen in this kind of way, and were determined that it would happen in this kind of way. And to be honest, to call it an ill-intentioned mob just tells you something very bad. I mean, these people were here protesting about fascism, protesting about racist murders, protesting about the growth of fascism. They were not a mob. They were people from all walks of life, all ages. They wanted to come with this single intention of closing the BNP headquarters, and they were treated like criminals. It's disgraceful.
It says the physical presence and appearance of large numbers of fully equipped riot police was the single most persuasive deterrent. Was it?
Well, it didn't deter people. People came on the demonstration and they were attacked. That's what happened. So it wasn't a deterrent. A deterrent would be if somebody said there's 7,000 riot police over there, don't come to the demonstration. So I don't really quite get that phrase. It doesn't make sense. It wasn't a deterrent. And it wasn't an ill-intentioned mob.
The choice of words for the next sentence may be interesting. The second major factor was the choice of battleground by police, and we've gone over the geography. From your side of the fence, were you about choosing a battleground?
Not at all. The battleground, the police put themselves in the dominant position. They made sure they were in a position to do it. And I think, as you say, I don't think that use of the term is accidental. I think they saw it as a battle and they wanted to defeat the demonstrators.
But looking at it from another perspective, if an enormous number of people angry at the hideous events that had happened recently in southeast London had got into the confined space of Upper Wickham Lane around the bookshop, very bad things could have happened, couldn't they?
Very bad things did happen on that day, and they were caused by the attacks on the demonstrators. And let's just kind of put it another way, that surely in a democracy, people who, as you say, were very, very exercised about these questions, very concerned about them, and quite rightly, and very few people now would deny that they were correct to be concerned about them. Are we seriously saying that these people aren't going to be able to march anywhere apart from Trafalgar Square? That they're not allowed to go to the area where the headquarters is? They're not allowed to express their concern. They're not allowed to say to the people in that local area, it is not acceptable that this headquarters exists. I think it was absolutely wrong for the police to behave in the way that they did. And I think in terms of what we now know about the Stephen Lawrence murder, in terms of all the things that we now know with hindsight, it was absolutely the right thing to do to go there. And the police themselves have got, from that area, have a whole number of questions to answer about their policing, both on the day, but also about the racist murders.
Could we take that down, please? And could we have up the document, which you will find at tab B46? It's 3 3s, 2 2s. We're now moving into the aftermath. This is a report which is attributed to both HN 101 and HN 78, 22nd of October. And if we look at paragraph 2, following the recent violent anti-British National Party demonstration in Welling, the Socialist Worker Party has launched a counter-offensive to the negative press that has been received. This has been achieved by dedicating a large proportion of its organ, Socialist Worker, dated the 23rd of October 1993, to the truth about the incident. Furthermore, party notes, the weekly internal party communication, sets out guidelines to be adopted when members are confronted on the subject of the violence displayed at the Welling demonstration. In effect, this states that the party only advocates the use of violence in self-defence or in defence of a democratic majority who seek fundamental change. By imposing unacceptable conditions, police had made confrontation inevitable. Is it right that a party line was established in the aftermath of the demonstration in these terms?
The whole paragraph you're talking about?
Well, it says, in effect, this states that the party only advocates. Does that accurately reflect the party line?
Yes, I think it does. And I think Julie, I know after the demonstration when she was interviewed in the press, and I think representatives of YRE made similar points, that there was, they created the conditions where you would have the likelihood of violence erupting, not through the actions of the demonstrators, but through their own actions. And I feel when you look at it more and more, I think you have to say this was quite a deliberate attempt to stop protest against the BNP in that part of London. And not just in that part of London, because the then commissioner was also involved in these discussions. So that's how I see it, yes. And I think Julie said that they knew that something bad would happen as a result of closing off all the routes. When you close off all the routes with that number of people, whether it's major football match or whatever it is, you are going to have a problem of crush, you're going to have a problem of people being frightened, you're going to have a problem of people panicking and not knowing where they're going. And all of that was a result of the policing operation.
Now, we know that there was Julie Waterson's plan to sit down, and I've understood from your evidence that some people did do that. But we also know that there were other people who did throw projectiles at the police. Would the SWP's position be that the people who did that were using violence in self-defence?
I think what happens in a situation like that, as I understand it, people threw placards and things like that, or some people at the front or near the front did that. I think it's totally understandable in these situations, because what happened when people sat down was they then got the horses coming into their ranks, they then got clubbed around the head by the police. All of these things actually happened, and there's all sorts of evidence, visual evidence, and all sorts of anecdotal evidence that those things happen. So it is not surprising in that situation that people will respond in a way that isn't planned or isn't orchestrated, but is understanding when people have got their backs against the wall, which was the situation that people were finding themselves in.
And you would say that that was all the result of the police imposing unacceptable conditions?
I think the police knew when they were going to block all these routes, they must have known that there would be a confrontation. And in fact, one of the people who reported on this was a journalist on the New Statesman who actually said that they blocked off the road, and this was denied by the police and denied by much of the press for a few weeks. And eventually they got film footage and it was shown to be absolutely right. But he said that when he was attacked by a policeman, this man said to him, you knew what was going to happen when you came here. You're the sort of person who comes to this sort of thing. You should expect whatever you're going to get. Now that was very much, I think, their attitude towards it.
The officer who gave evidence earlier this week, HN 90, suggests that the SWP tailored violence according to the event. Some events there'd be no violence, some events there would be. Did the SWP tailor its use of violence?
I don't really understand the context in which he said that or what he meant by it. I think violence is something that happens on relatively few demonstrations, and it happens in that situation. I don't take the position that I'm just going to condemn all that violence. I take the position it shouldn't have happened, why did it happen, and look at the reasons why it happened. The idea people tailor it and say, well, okay, it's all right to do it on that demonstration but not on another one, I think is fanciful, to tell the truth. But I don't know what context he was referring to.
I don't think I need pursue that with you any further. So I'm going to move on to another topic, which is we're going back to the hitters now. If we could have tab 48's 27957. This may not be very easy to read. Let's see how we go. If we could have the next page, please. Thank you. If you could, we'll see, could you try blowing up the first half of the text and see if we can read that? This is a report from February 1994. The following information has been received from a secret and reliable source. It would appear that in the wake of the recent anti-Nazi League debacle at Braintree, and the recent spate of attacks on youths of Asian heritage, the so-called ANL hitters, phone tree has once again become mooted. I'm not sure whether that says mooted or muted.
I think it's mooted.
This is particularly disappointing in view of the superb relations the ANL enjoy with Searchlight, which means it is often in a position to attack the Nazis. Thus, attempts are being made to reorganize the hitters unit, who are generally people who can handle themselves and would be willing to attack the right wing. It is agreed that they should not have a name, lest they fall into the trap of being elitist, and their actions must be sanctioned by the Central Committee of the Socialist Workers' Party, SWP. If we just stop there, was there ever a phone tree for people of a violent disposition within the ANL?
Not to the best of my knowledge. And it certainly wasn't sanctioned by the Central Committee of the SWP if it was true.
Did the ANL enjoy good relations with Searchlight?
I think so. They worked more closely with Searchlight by the sort of mid-90s, yeah.
And what benefit did the ANL gain from its cooperation with Searchlight?
Well, Searchlight, as you know, is a magazine which kind of focuses very much on individual fascists and what they're doing and who they are and the role of the far right in not just British society but European society. So I think it would just have been a sort of political relationship, in other words, that you work with them over particular things. I don't think it means much more than that. I don't quite understand, which means it's often in a position to attack the Nazis.
Could we go to the second half of the text, please? This authorisation would be granted by Julie Waterson, but only if their actions are seen to be political and not squadist. Privacy, something long-term member of the Socialist Workers' Party, SWP, and worker at the ANL headquarters, has been told to select comrades who are trustworthy and have the right physical and political characteristics to carry out this work. To the best of your knowledge, is there any truth in that?
No, as I say, I don't think that would have been sanctioned by the Central Committee, and Julie was a member of the Central Committee, so no, I don't think it's true.
Prior to Welling and at Brick Lane, such hitters' activity had been sanctioned by the party, but on an ad hoc basis.
Well,
is that true?
According to this person, but not... no, it's not true. I mean, there's a whole load of things here that just are sort of asserted without any evidence whatsoever, without any kind of sense that it's anything other than pub gossip or anything like that. And this seems to me an example of that, really.
This new proposal would put the unit on a constant footing. It is envisaged that the unit will consist of between 40 and 70 members. It is interesting to note that Chris Bambury, who played a significant role on the two previous occasions mentioned above, has been somewhat sidelined, and the key to setting up the unit is now controlled by Waterson. Is there any truth in any of that?
I don't think so, and it seems a bit contradictory because we've been told all the way through that Chris Bambury's, behaving in this manner, that he's much more aggressive than anybody else. We're now told this hitters thing is set up by, that Julie Waterson has sidelined him and she's going to control it. It seems to me that this whole thing is a fantasy by the undercover agent here.
If anything like this had been happening and being discussed in the ANL and the SWP at the time, would you have known about it?
Yes, I think so.
Could we take this document down, please, and go to tab B50, 28019? If we could have page 2, please. Now, this is a report. If we can have it blown up, please. Thank you very much. June 1994. It would appear that the idea put forward by Socialist Workers' Party SWP Central Committee member Chris Bambury to form an organised security unit termed Hitters within the SWP to defend it, and the Anti-Nazi League, ANL, has been vetoed by Julie Waterson. Banbury has gone as far as compiling a list of physically competent comrades who he wanted to approach to join his band. Not only has Waterson vetoed Banbury's scheme, she has also ousted two of his lieutenants, Privacy, and Privacy, from their jobs in the ANL office. Privacy and Privacy figured highly on Banbury's list of hitters. Both have been told that they are a disruptive influence and are banned from working in the ANL offices forthwith. Was there any plan that you were aware of by Chris Banbury to form a hitters unit?
No, there wasn't. And as I say, I think this is the kind of thing that it seems to me this is talking to maybe a couple of people, this is what they all think would be a good idea, rather than actually what did happen and what was agreed. And none of this was agreed. And, I noticed in one of these documents that HN78 says, when Tony Cliff died, Chris Banbury would go off and form a sort of Red Action type of group. Well, Tony Cliff died in 2000 and that never happened, and nor was it remotely likely to happen. So I just think there's such a level of self-promotion, aggrandisement and inaccuracy about these reports that they're just not fantastically useful, and they're certainly not, this certainly isn't true.
Even if it didn't come to fruition, was there any discussion by anybody along these lines?
Well, I couldn't possibly answer that question because obviously I don't know, and it's speculative, and it's totally speculative, really. But I would have thought, of course, people discuss all sorts of things when they're talking one-to-one, but no serious political activist in the SWP would have thought this was the way to go. I really think that is the case.
It goes on to say, in sidelining Banbury and his idea of a formalised security group, Waterson has in fact brought closer the possibility of such a group forming on an ad hoc basis. Many feel that the group would come to emulate Red Action in style and tactics, and Privacy has been seen drinking with leading Red Action figures recently. In any event, the issues of a more physical confrontational facility within the SWP-ANL will not disappear, and there is a growing sympathy towards the idea within the rank and file of both the SWP and the ANL. Were you aware of any growing sympathy within either the SWP or the ANL to a more physical confrontational facility?
No, I wasn't aware of that. And I think that again, this is that somebody was drinking with somebody from Red Action. Well, okay, that may well be true. Obviously, I don't know. But I think that I don't recognise as a growing sympathy. What is true is that people feel with the fascists, they feel that they're under, that not just them, not mainly them, but actually ethnic minorities, all sorts of other people may be under threat from the fascists, and people feel frustrated about that, and they feel frustrated that the police do so little to actually, they don't facilitate people who are opposing the fascists, and all too often they've facilitated fascist demonstrations. But that's a very different thing from people feeling frustrated about it and seeing it as a political option. And as I said earlier, the experience for us in the late 70s was a very educational experience of what happened with the anti-fascist movement, and that we had to assert the need for mass campaigning activity as opposed to individual fighting with the fascists or anything else. And that was definitely the whole way in which we wanted to approach the question of the BNP.
Two final matters. The first is a Blood and Honour concert in 1994. Could we have up, please, 0742898? This is about an event on the 1st of October 1994, Charing Cross Station, involving the ANL. Says very likely if opposing sides actually do confront each other, that's in relation to the likelihood of disorder, mood, hostile. Reads, a source within the ANL hierarchy has heard that a Blood and Honour gig is to be staged this Saturday, and that it is the intention of the ANL to confront would-be concert goers at Charing Cross railway station. Normally, the party would be content just to derive publicity and hence recruitment from such a confrontation. The leaders would manoeuvre demonstrators into a position whereby police could segregate them from the fascists by use of barriers at the latter's redirection point. Once securely protected by police, the demonstrators would then be content to chant their slogans and wave their banners. Should the venue for the concert then become known, the demonstrators would make their way there en masse, but only if the police remained in tow, in the hope that their sheer presence would cause the concert to be abandoned. On this occasion, however, it appears that the leadership of the Socialist Workers' Party has sanctioned a different tactic, in that in addition to the above, a small group of comrades who can handle themselves will attend the redirection point, avoid being barricaded in with the larger group, and hopefully do battle with the fascists. Can you recall the preparations for this demonstration?
No, not in any detail, no. I mean, I remember there was a Blood and Honour gig, but I don't know any more details about it than that, really.
Are you able to help us with whether or not the second paragraph is true?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, there's always all sorts of tactics on these demonstrations where people say, look, a group of us will go and see if we can see where the fascists are and all this kind of thing. And obviously wanted to avoid being barricaded in. But that isn't a different tactic in a general sense. And it would be something that was almost certainly discussed by the people organising the demonstration rather than the SWP leadership.
Could we now take that down? Final topic from me. In 1995, Trevor Morris says he attended a meeting in Tottenham about Joy Gardner and the campaign for justice for Joy Gardner. And I'm sure you've seen his statement, but if you haven't, I'll call it up. And he describes on his account talking people out of burning down Tottenham by suggesting they go and riot in Mayfair instead, and that none of them could be bothered to do that, so nothing happened. He goes on to say that he had to justify his actions to members of the SWP leadership. Do you know anything about that at all?
I would say that I think he is quite a fantasist over his relationships with the SWP leadership. I don't think he talks all the time about what a close relationship he has with people and how much they relied on him and all this, most of which I think is simply untrue. On this particular instance, I can't say whether there would have been anything, whether he was asked to justify his statement. I certainly think it's a remarkable statement, that the idea that people wouldn't be bothered if they wanted to riot in Mayfair, that they wouldn't be bothered to get on the tube, which takes about, 15 minutes from Seven Sisters, you know. I mean, it just seems to me that was, again, it's a piece of self-aggrandisement rather than an accurate description of what he was saying. And but I wasn't at the meeting, I don't know, so I don't know exactly.
And just to be clear, what recollections do you have of Trevor Morris?
I don't remember him very well at all. I do remember his name, or his cover name, and I do remember seeing him at certain things. But I think he very much... I feel that for somebody who was 4 years inside the SWP, he had no understanding of what we were trying to do, and he was always looking for, you know, episodes that he could portray as in some way damaging, particularly to Chris Bambury, who I think he obviously had some kind of animus towards. And he just strikes me as somebody, I thought it was really a failure of our education department that he seemed to think that we got money from the Soviet Union, which was obviously... nobody would have taken that seriously. And I think he's somebody who obviously was very unreliable, was always trying to put his own actions in a much better light than perhaps they were, and obviously was very dishonest as well in terms of his personal life. So that's what I think about him now, but I don't remember very much in detail about him at the time. And he certainly wasn't close, or particularly close, to Julie Waterson or the other people he claimed to be close to.